Hi, everybody. Welcome to another webcast for us at ChangeNerd. We are so excited today. As many of you all know, my name is Stephanie Waite. I'm the co-founder, along with Brian Hampton, for ChangeNerd. And as you all know, as part of the ChangeNerd community, part of our values are really being provocative, having high integrity, and also excellence. And then our last but not least value is really around building community. And if anyone are experts or pioneers in this space, it's these two women that I have on with us today. I am so excited and over the moon to actually share what we're going to start as a series for HR leaders really making an impact for Latinas in the community. So Priscilla, Ariana, welcome. I want to give a quick little shout out to both of you. Again, as I said earlier, you both are really strong pioneers and huge HR executive leaders in this space who are already making an impact for Latinas in the community. So we're excited to have you today. We also know that both of you have been very busy driving cultural change across organizations. And just like us, we share that value of community. So I'm going to introduce both of you. Feel free to expand upon it if you'd like. But Priscilla, thank you so much for being here. Priscilla Guaso, obviously you are the author and the founder and speaker for Latinas Rising Up in HR. And that's how we brought you today. I'm excited for you to share a little bit about your book. Do you have your book next to you? Can you show us?
I do.
Oh, look at it. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So you've been an HR exec for the last 15 years, really having experience across multiple industries in hospitality, healthcare. And I know that you're originally from Chicago, right?
I am, but I'm living between two worlds. I live in Chicago. I'm from Chicago, live in Chicago, but I'm also recently having relocated to Miami. So I live between both cities.
We're so jealous of you here in Chicago at the moment. Thank you for joining us from sunny Miami. So I'm going to go to Ariana now. I'm so excited to have you, Ariana, as well. You also have 15 years of experience as an HR exec, and you've also worked across multiple industries as well, including pharma, professional services, advertising and marketing, manufacturing. So we have such incredible wealth of knowledge here. And I also know you hail from South Texas, but you're living in Chicago.
I do, yes. I did that reverse commute from Chicago to South Texas. But who knows? I may become a permanent snowbird. Who knows?
Wouldn't we all love that? Well, amazing. Well, thank you to the two of you for giving us your time today and sharing it with our ChangeNerd community. We have people from all over the world who will be listening today. I know many of the individuals on the call not only are just executives in the HR space, but also across industries, as well as independent practitioners in the change space and also internal practitioners. So hopefully today, as we think about starting this series of a few parts really around making an impact for Latinas in HR, today hopefully will spark a couple of bits of knowledge, data, things that you can take back with you and immediately and pragmatically implement today. So we're excited. So let's get the conversation started. Are you all ready?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right. So Priscilla, I'm going to go to you. I mean, you have this incredible book. I know Adi has, joined you in really building this community. Tell us a little bit about, why did you write this book about, Latinas rising up in HR? What inspired you? Tell us a little bit more about how you got here.
Sure, happy to. Well, Stephanie, thank you for having us. It's great to collaborate with other individuals that are looking to make a change and really extend the opportunity, which is really important, I think, for all of us. With my 15 years of experience in human resources, I've been very lucky and very blessed. And I'm very grateful because I've had a number of sponsors and mentors and just champions around me. I will say, though, unfortunately, as I moved up in my career and got 2 levels away from the CEO, I realized very quickly that I was one of the exceptions, unfortunately. And it didn't hit me until I looked around and was thinking, where's my community at? Where are my other fellow Latinas? And it was very hard to find them. It was very hard to, and not just because they're Latinas, but really embody what is important to me in leadership, right? And so as I grew in my career, I also encountered a couple of things very personal, right? And you can read about that in my book, which I call them these defining moments that are not just career related, but personally. And I felt the place I could be most vulnerable was with my community and sharing that. And since I didn't have that, I didn't know where to go. And this light, this little fire that I had in me of wanting to do something, I've always been told if it's not there, create it. make it. And sometimes it seems easier to do that in your mind, right? But with any change, it requires for you to be bold and take those steps. And so I connected with my publisher, who is an old friend of mine, actually, happens to be Latina as well. She's doing phenomenal in the international publishing field, and said, why don't we do this together? Your goal and your ultimate vision is to have a community where Latinas can rise together, but the connector really is that they all work in human resources, right? And we're elevating one another. And so the book became almost that calling card. The goal was not the book. The goal is the community. And so we started with the book. We spent the last, I would say, this started in February, so almost 9 months to create this baby. And we looked and searched hard for Latinas that were working in HR, that embodied vulnerable leadership, that had teams that were successful, and really were making a change in not just their own community, but within their corporations and within their backyard. And so that's where we ended up today. And I will proudly say we now have over 180 HR professionals, all Latinas, from various levels within HR, that are really looking for a place to build community and share best practices, and work with other corporations that want to also provide these opportunities to them. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how we got to where we are today.
Yes. I mean, and you all did an incredible amount of research too, to get to, your book. That's really kind of the encapsulating kind of, stories of individuals who I know across the country are yearning for that community. And you have a very similar story to ChangeNerd, where there was this gap, right? And it's like this whole idea around creating your own reality. And you did that. What's fascinating is that, it sounds like your basis or your value is really around creating community. And I'm going to actually flip it over to Ariana. It looks like it worked, Priscilla, because you got an amazing Latina sitting here, Ariana, who you guys found each other. So Ari, tell me a little bit, how did you get involved in this work? How did you guys meet, and kind of where are you at, within your career, and just sort of your first ideas around this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because, I'm on LinkedIn, and it came up on my feed, and I just started, really what drew me to it and what resonated is that exact title of Latinas in HR. And I've been in HR the last 15 years. When I moved here to Chicago, it was very, different. People just looked different, spoke different. I just found myself in a different environment, different world, especially in the corporate world. It's still very different than the corporate world down south. And so it was funny because it just spoke to me immediate. It was this red flag. And so I read that she was about to launch. It was like in 2 weeks, she was going to launch this book. And it was really shining a light on Latinas who had risen through the ranks, or that were rising, those movers and shakers, those current disruptors right now in the book. And it was already going to launch. And I literally thought to myself, why am I not in that book? I'm a Latina. I'm moving and I'm creating impact. And that was the calling right then and there. But seeing that really, and then again, I took it upon myself to get involved. I contacted Priscilla directly. I DM'd her. I went onto Instagram and also added the book, or added the profile, and just really getting involved myself, right? Because if you don't step in, it's not like she was going to come knocking on my door. So making myself noticeable and really wanting to find a place for community too. It wasn't just, being part of that, but being part of a community for Latinas, specifically in HR, the industry that I work in, what I've been practicing for so many years. What can I learn from this community, or what safe space can they also provide for me that I'm not getting anywhere else? And that is what led me to Priscilla and to the community. And it just speaks to me directly. And so that is why I wanted to be involved. And I've inserted myself.
Right?
I'm
Which
glad you did.
all great HR leaders do, right? It's really about
Yes.
forging that, and creating your own reality. And I think that's what I'm hearing a lot around, key characteristics of individuals, not just Latinas, but individuals who are in HR and can create much more inclusive environments, is around really defining your identity, redefining who you are, defining what your community stands for, and allowing people to find you, right? I think that that's, kind of one of the magic qualities and characteristics, it sounds like, for somebody who's leading not only a community, but, also looking to create a community down the road. So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing the history and just kind of the context around it and how you all met. I think that's really important for our listeners to know as we get a little bit more provocative. Let's take a shift. You guys know that ChangeNerd, one of our values is provocativeness, right? We want to have the conversations that nobody else is having. We want to have the conversations and share with our viewership, what are people thinking about? And again, these are really our points of view based on, Priscilla, a lot of the research and interviews that you did to get to your book, to get this point of view around Latinas rising up in HR. So let's talk a little bit, both of you sharing, when we think about organizations, right, and we think about moving to this, Latina equitable culture, what do organizations need to have in their mind? What needs to change? What needs to happen in order to move to this Latina equitable culture? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think what's really important, and one of the things I think we all know within HR is data. Data helps, right? Data helps in painting a picture. And so for this book, it required a lot of the digging, right? Trying to understand, pulling data from my past, like when I was in diversity and inclusion for a bit of my career, pulling the stats now for my community, because I was doing it for all communities, but now pulling it out for us. And what one of the things I think is most important to keep in mind that I actually reference in our book is Catalyst.org mentions that only 4.3% of Latinas hold management positions. That was one match that lit a fire in us, right, to do something. The second being that 4% of executive positions of Fortune 100 companies are held by Latinas. And that's also coming from Catalyst's Missing Pieces report. And the last stat that really impacted me was, again, trying to make sure that there's representation, right? But if there's no representation at the top, how do you expect to see that trickle down? And when I saw that in the 2019 ACER report, they shared that 2% of board seats are held by Latinas, that was enough for me to stop and say, we've got to do something, right? And I think that data is something that's very important, that all companies should know this very easily, right? I mean, it's something that we can easily even have as post-it notes by our desk, just to remind us again of what we're working with, the realities of where we are today. And the truth is those numbers are not changing one day at a time, right? It takes a long time to make a drastic change. And so that's one area. I know Ariana can share a couple other stats of just that also are fairly important for us to know, not just as Latinas, but just as a community in general within the U.S.
Sure, and absolutely. The Latin community is growing, as we all know, with the census. Every 10 years, we keep on seeing that, the Latin community continues to grow, and Latinas make up 1 in every 5 women. So not only does our pay get hit just because of the minority that we're women, but then we also get hit on the ethnicity of being Latin. So that's something really important to think about, and also just have, it's kind of like a double whammy, when we're looking at just pay, women's pay, and then you break it down even further, and then it's Latina or Latino. So, but really, for every dollar a non-Hispanic white man makes, a Latin woman, Latina, makes only 54 cents to that dollar. And what does that mean? There's always this confusion around race and ethnicity, and race is one thing and ethnicity is another. It is possible, you guys, and I know there's a lot of people listening around the world that may not be aware, but you can be a white Hispanic male. And so I think there's a lot of confusion. I want to bring more awareness to that, even within the Hispanic community. A lot of them, when filling out the US Census, will put on their other, not knowing that they are white Hispanic. So that's a whole other discussion, but I will say that I do want to bring and shine a light to how that gap is 54 cents to the dollar is a huge gap. And that comes from the wage gap as well. And so Latinas over their lifetime lose $1 million over their career. once you count that, once it compounds right over that. So that is huge. And I know there's not a lot of awareness. We do it once a year, like to Priscilla's point, Latina Pay Day to help bring awareness. But what are corporations, what are we doing as HR professionals to help move that dial forward? If you are in HR, you don't have to be Latin to make an impact. I want those who are listening today that maybe, you know, if you guys do have a salary grade structure, and if you do not, you can do your own research. You can look at where those disparities are and start advocating for our community and for those who are not getting paid the equal pay rate compared to a white male with the same experience.
Adiana, I'd also add to ask a lot of questions, but follow up with action, right? So to your point, what you mentioned, the grades and what are you doing with that information once you know that the salary grades aren't equitable? Do you know how many, and again, I'm putting my lens of I'm a Latina looking at Latinas, right? I could also do this with a different lens. But today, as I speak to you from a Latina in HR, do we know how many Latinas are being hired at your organization and in what roles and for how much are they getting paid? And how does that compare? Again, you've got to dig in, right, to the data. How quickly are Latinas leaving voluntarily and involuntarily at your organization? Pew Research Center just sent out or shared recently that Hispanic women have seen a steeper decline in employment, almost about minus 21% during this COVID downturn than any other woman or men. So again, thinking back of the reasons, the whys, right? Even in our own lives, the whys, why is this occurring? And once you do have those answers, right, what is the action that you're creating behind it? Are other Latinas in your organization being developed? Are they being advocated for? Are they being given opportunities for to get their SPHR, to get their master's, to get their MBA? Yes, there are programs for tuition reimbursement and all of that, but in order for us to really get ahead, we need those opportunities outside of just the one program or plans that you have at an organization, and have sponsors, have leaders that are taking it on themselves. And so this requires even more of I'm really going to start digging in a little bit more here, where you as a leader, and I'm speaking to everyone listening today, how many Latinas in your network or at your company are you truly helping lift and rise, right? Exactly how the book says, right? How are you helping others rise? Can you name 5 Latinas on your team that you have in the back of your mind that you're helping actively with giving them stretch assignments, and not to give them more work because you know we can do it, right? We all can do it, but really to help broaden their skills, their knowledge, their expertise in human resources, so that they get noticed by the CEO, they get noticed by the chief marketing officer, they get noticed by people outside of human resources. So they're also noticed as leaders, right? As leaders within your organization. And at some point, we'll be able to have that seat at the table. I remember very early on in my career raising my hand, because that's just who I am, and saying, can I sit in one of these executive meetings? Now I laugh because I was so young. And again, there's a lot of information that gets shared at these meetings, right? But again, not being afraid to raise our hand, but once we do ask for something, being able to come in and say, oh, you know what, let me give you that opportunity. And I will say it's because of those opportunities that I and many others that I've spoken with within our community that I've seen them be able to rise. One, it's the ask, and the other is the opening that door.
To your point, I want to add and probably sprinkle a little bit of cultural nuance to this as well. And for those that are listening and have Latinas on your teams, you may not always find them. To your point, Priscilla, raising their hand. There's it's part of the culture. And I don't want to say all, and I don't mean to generalize, but I will say for the majority, it's, keep your head down, do the work, don't ask the questions, just do as you're so there's also that awareness of the culture around us or who we are as people. And again, this is not generalizing for any Latinas that are listening right now. I mean, we're definitely rising up and changing that and carrying that flag, but also for those who might have them on their team who may not be as outspoken. doesn't mean that they are not entitled for that same development. They might just be not as I don't want to say forthcoming, as outspoken and willing to raise their hand and take that initiative. But I think that's also very important to be aware of and realize that's where they need that extra support. That's where they need that help in elevating, because there is that struggle to do it on their own.
Yeah, what I love about what we're talking about is exactly, I think, all of our philosophies, as well as ChangeNerd philosophies, and as well as it sounds like, Latinas Rising Up in HR is all about, it's bi-directional, right? It's not this just unidirectional approach where
Right.
people are, clawing to do something or constantly asking and being shut down, or on the opposite, which we know that there's the concept of minority tax, right? Like, let me tap a Latina on the shoulder because they are Latina. I think there's this whole concept of it's not just about one race or ethnicity. It's really about, where do we see building inclusive environments, right? How do we as leaders, because everybody listening to this call is a leader in some way. In addition, they're all driving some sort of change project, right? An initiative. We know, and we talked about this at the beginning of the call, EDI initiatives, that for almost every single organization has been a change initiative. And even just changing within your team or asking to do something differently, that's a change. Individuals, people who are leading projects, to have in the back of their mind, this EDI component, but it's also about building inclusive workplaces, inclusive environments, inclusive leadership practices, honoring diversity of thought, in really, championing a safe space for people to come forward, so that it is, sort of that ease of cultural nuance. It's a bi-directional, if not a multi-directional dance that we're doing. It's interesting. I think you probably all saw the report that came out, or the announcement that came out with NASDAQ, where they're going to require more than 3,000 of their companies that are listed in the stock exchange to actually improve their boardroom diversity by appointing at least one woman, and also at least one minority and or an LGBTQIA plus individual to their board. Now that's, right, huge in the sense of that's a sort of domineering factor where it's now required. And then there's also this grassroots sort of organic, community driven expectation that we're now having across the board, which is really where Latinas Rising Up in HR, and then also ChangeNerd comes into play. So I love how this is playing out in the environment. I love how we're starting to see these huge strides being made for creating inclusive and much more equitable environments. I want to open it up as we're sort of closing out here to you both. What, just sort of some last thoughts, things that are coming to your mind as we think about the conversation that we had today. What do you really want our ChangeNerd listeners to think about, to hear from you all?
Oh, good question. I guess I'll go first. I think it's really important, again, to your point, Stephanie, of creating an inclusive, but also the belonging component, right? Creating a community where, for me, is important to have somewhere where I know I'm supported and uplifted and genuinely helped, right? That competition, because even within our own community, we can be pretty competitive with each other, but really where I'm able to reach out and seek help and receive that reciprocal help back, and it be genuine, authentic relationships. That, I think, is what's important in creating those communities, ERGs within the organization and then outside as well.
Yeah, that's great. Priscilla, what are your thoughts? Kind of like last words, advice for our listeners, or what are your thoughts?
Sure. So there's a saying in Spanish that says, "You are who you spend the most time with."
Can you say it in Spanish so we can? I mean, we're talking about Latina cultures, yet we have not even spoken like a language associated with
right.
Culture. So let's bring that in.
Well, I guess it could say something like "Eres con quien andas," right? You tend to be similar to who you're around with, you're surrounded by. And so the reason I bring this up is I think this goes across any community, right? And I think about myself too. I make an effort to also ensure that I'm not always just hanging out with Latinas, right? Either. I've learned a lot from my career because I've been quite a chameleon when I first started out and just trying to be with everybody. But I will say that now, after 15 plus years in my career, I've learned that I've gotten even more bold. I've gotten this courage and this self-confidence, right? Because I know what I know now. I know that I have the skills in this field in HR, and I'm very confident in it because of just my accomplishments. However, at the same time is also knowing that we all have a responsibility of raising and rising others next to us, right? And that can be within your own community and other communities, but because of where we are today and the climate of our country in general, there's a lot of people that need more focus than others. And I'm again wearing my lens of being Latina today and speaking from the Latina community, specifically in HR. HR, unfortunately, and I've heard this amongst all of us as professionals, is we don't always do the best in developing our own people. And that's an opinion that I've developed over some time, but it's also our responsibility to find those opportunities. But I would say I would really love to urge our listeners today to encourage you to think about who are those Latinas around you that you see are rock stars, and they're struggling with a lot. Each one of us has a story. And so I encourage you to get to know them, to learn who they are personally, to learn who they are professionally, and to be that person that opens doors for them. Again, why we started this initiative to begin with, because I promise you, and I know that's really hard to say, but I do promise you that good people try to lift others up. And by investing in other communities, you're teaching a lot, right? Just through your actions. And so that's one thing I would love to leave with everyone, and challenge themselves, because sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, but not until we're actually creating an action and it shows and other people can see that too. It gets validated and it becomes this ripple effect. And so ultimately, I'd love to see us all be those change makers, take a bold step, speak up if we see something that's not right, or come up with solutions, right? And not wait for other people to create them, and work together. Let's collaborate.
All right. Well, that is bold statements and incredible statements to really challenge, the ChangeNerd community to really be advocates, allies, but also just take responsibility right within their own leadership roles. So we are so grateful that you all have spent this last couple of minutes with us and sharing really about your history and who you are. I know individuals listening to this webcast today, which we love doing these because we're hoping that individuals get inspired and are able to transform their own career trajectory based on what they heard. So thank you, all of you who joined us today for our ChangeNerd webcast around really supporting the Latina community in the HR space and creating this community impact. I know many of you on this call, if not all of you, including myself, want to learn more. Go ahead if you want to join Latinas Rising Up in HR. You can go to www.latinasrisingupinhr.com. Again, it's www.latinasrisingupinhr.com. Or you can go ahead onto Facebook, LinkedIn, or IG at Latinas in HR. Again, that's at Latinas in HR. If you want to connect with Priscilla or Ariana individually, you can go ahead and connect with them. You see their names below here today. Search for them, connect with them, and continue to build the community, which is what you all have really ignited. I also, Priscilla, we're all about supporting our individuals. So I also want to give you the support really around your book. So if you want to purchase the book, you can do so on Amazon and really read and be mentored. Mentored through the inspirational stories of, the Latinas that you've interviewed who are in HR and who have really rose through the ranks. So I can't wait for our readers to take a look at that. The other value that we really have at ChangeNerd, as you all know, is community and giving back through social impact. So I'm pleased to say as well that Priscilla and Rising Up in HR, that partial proceeds of this book will go towards 2 scholarships for 2021. So really the disruptors and movers and shakers in the space who are making that impact. So your donations essentially, or your purchase, actually gives back to the community as well. So with that being said, I want to thank you all again for joining me today and talking about rising up, Latinas rising up in HR. For those of you who are listening who may not be with us in our community just yet, go to community.changenerd.com. Again, that's community.changenerd.com. Go ahead and sign in with your LinkedIn credentials and join our community today to continue this conversation. If you have any questions as well, please feel free to reach out to me, Stephanie Waite, or to Brian Hampton as the co-founders of ChangeNerd, and find us on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect with you there. So everybody have a great rest of the day, and we hope to talk with you all soon. Look for the remainder of the series coming up in the next couple of months.